The charge was leveled immediately. You labeled me unfit, Maxine. Dan Bongino occupied the middle of the CNN set in Los Angeles at 9 p.m. Eastern during the prime broadcast slot. 300 spectators squeezed into a room built for audience interaction, with half dressed in red and half in blue, all braced for a clash. Cameras were positioned in every corner while the lights burned intensely, and Jake Tapper sat between the two, attempting to project an authority he did not possess that evening. Bongino's voice held a specific character, that undeniable law enforcement tone, not shouting or hostile, but simply definitive. It was the kind of inflection that implies we are both aware of the inevitable conclusion. You claimed I was unqualified, referring to a former NYPD officer and Secret Service agent who actually safeguarded presidents and worked for a living. You called me unfit while Maxine Waters sat opposite him, secure in a confidence constructed over 30 years in Congress. That assurance came from decades of never encountering actual repercussions and a career spent evading accountability for whatever occurred. She wore that specific expression, the look that communicated she had handled far worse adversaries than him. However, she had not encountered anyone like him, and Bongino leaned in just a fraction. If you wish to discuss credentials, let us discuss your credentials. Let us discuss 30 years spent in Congress, while your district has progressively deteriorated. Let us discuss utilizing your office to rescue your husband's bank. Let us discuss paying your daughter more than $1 million from campaign treasury funds. Let us discuss residing in a $6 million estate in Beverly Hills, while you represent South Central Los Angeles. He stopped speaking to let the silence expand, while 300 people held their breath. Let us discuss that specific topic. And Waters moved ever so slightly, but Bongino noticed the motion. After years of analyzing suspects, analyzing criminals, and analyzing individuals preparing to lie, he perceived everything. He turned to address the camera directly and spoke to the folks watching from home. What you are about to witness is straightforward. 5 scandals, 5 instances of corruption, and 5 reasons why this woman should have been indicted years ago instead of serving in Congress. Included are bank bailouts, payments to her daughter, mansions in Beverly Hills, inciting violence, and 30 years of such behavior. He turned back to Waters, declaring she was going to answer for every bit of it right there, right then, on camera, with no exit route. The atmosphere in the studio transformed, becoming electric and hazardous. This was not a debate, but rather an interrogation, and everyone present realized it. Bongino smiled, though it was neither friendly nor warm. It was the smile a police officer offers when he knows he possesses the evidence, when he knows the suspect is culpable, and when he knows this is merely a formality before the handcuffs are applied. If you have been waiting for someone to finally ask Maxine Waters the questions that no one else will, share this stream and hit that button. What I am about to display is not a theory or an opinion, but documented fact and evidence, the type that sends individuals to prison. He retrieved a folder, a thick file containing documents, evidence, and proof. Let us proceed, as Bongino did not squander time with a build-up, opting instead to attack immediately, which is how interrogations function. Let me clarify something for you, Congresswoman, and he emphasized the title to make it sound nearly derogatory. During the 2008 financial crisis, you recall that banks were collapsing everywhere. Small banks and community banks, institutions that had served neighborhoods for generations, were all dying and desperate. He began to pace, channeling that radio host energy which was building up. Congress was deciding who survived and who perished, who received taxpayer funds, who was rescued, and who was abandoned. These were very critical decisions involving life and death for thousands of businesses and millions of jobs. Waters attempted to interrupt, raising her hand in that signature move, saying, "I am not done." He was not aggressive, but simply final in his demeanor. "You serve on the Financial Services Committee, the very committee responsible for making these decisions. You possess power, access, and influence." And he stopped pacing to face her directly. "You know what else you possess? A husband named Sidney Williams, who sits on the board of One United Bank. That is a bank which is failing, a bank which is desperate, and a bank that requires a bailout. What are the odds, truly, and what are the chances?" The sarcasm dripped from his words, thick and heavy. "So let me ask you something straightforward. Yes or no? Did you arrange a meeting between Treasury officials and One United Bank?" Waters' hand went to her pearls in an unconscious gesture, and Bongino saw it and noted it. It was that tell indicating she did not know she had been caught. "I followed proper procedures," she began, "but that is not a yes or no answer." He cut her off, not yelling or being aggressive, but acting purely like a police officer. "Did you arrange the meeting? Yes or no? Because the situation required a yes or a no." The studio fell silent. A complete silence where 300 people, all the cameras and all the crew, stopped to wait and watch. Waters' voice emerged smaller than it had been before. "I facilitated communication between the parties. You arranged it, which was not a question but a statement. You utilized your position and your power to secure a meeting with Treasury officials for your husband's failing bank. 1 week later, $12 million of taxpayer money, your money, was sent to save her husband's bank." He pointed at the audience, emphasizing that it was their money being used. He walked toward the audience and stood among them as one of them. "How many of you know someone who lost a business in 2008? Raise your hands." Hands began going up. 1, 5, 10, 20, 30, scattered throughout the audience. These were people who had lived through the crisis, who had lost businesses, lost savings, and lost everything. Bongino pointed at them, noting that they did not receive meetings, they did not receive bailouts, and they did not have Maxine Waters intervening on their behalf. "They simply lost everything," he said, turning back to Waters. "Meanwhile, your husband's bank was saved with their money. That is not complicated, Maxine. That is corruption. That is called corruption, where I come from." She tried again, her voice defensive now, stating that other banks also received TARP funds. Other banks were not married to members of Congress. His voice rose as he built his argument. "That is the difference, and that is the crime, using your position to benefit your family." Waters attempted her signature move again, hand up and voice rising, saying, "I am reclaiming my time." "You do not have time to reclaim," as Bongino was not backing down. Louder now and overwhelming, he declared that the people of California have been waiting for answers for 15 years. "It is my time now, and you are going to answer." The studio erupted, not with applause or booing, but just noise. It was the sound of 300 people realizing they were watching something real, something raw, and something that never happens on television anymore. Jake Tapper tried to interject, asking if we could maintain order, but nobody was listening. Bongino produced documents and held them up. The Ethics Committee report, your own Ethics Committee, found that you intervened. They found that your husband's bank benefited and found documented problems, but you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He walked back to center stage, and stood in front of Waters. Let me break this down for everyone watching. Small banks across California and across America, banks that served communities and employed people to help families, failed. They got nothing, and they died. He paused, then noted that one bank, one special bank where Maxine Waters' husband sat on the board, received $12 million. The person who arranged it, the person who made it happen, and the person who used her congressional power to save her family's investment was her. He pointed at her. Maxine Waters, the Beverly Hills Marxist living in luxury while preaching about poverty. She was using your money to save her family's wealth. Waters could not maintain eye contact, looking down at her notes, at her hands, or anywhere but at Bongino. She looked anywhere but at the cameras, and anywhere but at the 300 people watching her squirm. Bongino saw it. The break, the crack, and the moment when the armor starts failing. In my time in the Secret Service, we investigated financial crimes, corruption, bribery, and using your position for personal gain. I have seen it. I have arrested people for it, and I know what it looks like. He leaned forward to get closer, closing that interrogation room distance. And this is it. This is corruption documented and proven on the record. Someone in the audience shouted to arrest her, and others joined the chant. It started low at first, then building. Arrest her. Arrest her. Waters' hands were shaking now, visibly shaking and trembling. She tried to raise them to stop the noise and reclaim control, but control was gone, authority was gone, and power was gone. She was just a politician facing accusations she could not dodge. She faced evidence she could not deny, and truth she could not spin. Bongino let it build, letting the audience express what he had proven, then raised one hand. Silence was immediate and complete. That is round one. Your tax dollars, her family's bank. Small banks died while hers survived because she made it happen. If you are angry about that, and if you think Congress shouldn't use your money to bail out their families, share this comment to let everyone know, because we are just getting started. He picked up another folder, thicker than the first. Now, let us talk about her daughter. Let us talk about the $1 million from campaign funds, your donations, going to her daughter for years. Waters' face went pale. The first folder was bad, but this one was worse, and she knew it. Bongino's energy shifted, showing more sarcasm now with that radio host edge coming through. Okay, so we have established corruption number 1, bank bailout, family enrichment, and using taxpayer money. That is established, and that is fact. But wait. He paused with that trademark pause, building tension. There is more. Oh, there is so much more. And he walked toward Waters. She shifted in her seat, uncomfortable and looking for exits that did not exist. Let me tell you about Karen Waters, Maxine's daughter. I do not know her and have never met her, but I know her bank account. Her bank account is very healthy, and you know why. Another pause followed, because Mommy has been paying her from campaign funds. Your campaign donations, money from people who thought it was going to actual campaigns to fight for their district, went to representing their interests but instead went to her daughter. He stopped walking and faced the camera. Over $1 million is not a typo and not a mistake. Over $1 million. Back to Waters. Now I am just a former cop, just a guy who used to protect presidents, and just someone who actually worked for a living. But where I come from, when you take donations meant for campaigns and give them to your family, that is called embezzlement. That is called theft. And that is called fraud. Waters tried to mount a defense, her voice shaking. These are legitimate campaign expenditures. Legitimate. Bongino laughed, actually laughed, asking if $1 million to your daughter is legitimate. He pulled out papers, FEC filings, which are public record, and undeniable. Karen Waters runs something called slate mailers. You know what those are? Flyers and lists of endorsed candidates. They go out during elections and cost maybe 50 grand to produce. Maybe. He held up the papers showing Maxine Waters has paid her daughter over $1 million for slate mailers. It happened over years, consistently. Always family, always the daughter. He turned to the audience asking, "Let me ask you something. How many of you have donated to political campaigns? Raise your hands." Many hands went up, scattered throughout the studio. You are regular people, small donors, and believers. You thought that money went to ads, right? To staff, to actually campaigning, and to fighting for your interests. He let them nod and let them agree. Then, what if I told you it went to the candidate's daughter instead? What if I told you it went to family enrichment? How would you feel? The murmuring started, angry murmuring building and spreading. Bongino turned back to Waters, saying with all due respect, "Maxine," the words dripped with sarcasm, and I mean zero respect. "Your daughter has gotten rich off your political career. Over $1 million came from small donors, from people who couldn't afford it, and from families struggling to make rent. Their money went to your family." Waters tried again, saying, "My daughter provides valuable services." "Services?" He cut her off. Let me break this down. Other campaigns pay maybe $50,000 for slate mailers. Maybe you have paid over $1 million to your daughter, which is 20 times more for the same service. "How does that work?" he asked, and met silence as Waters could not answer. "I will tell you how it works. It is family enrichment. It is using your position to make your family wealthy. It is taking money from people who believed in you and giving it to people who share your DNA. That is how it works." He walked back to the audience and stood among them again. These people trusted you and sent money they did not have. $20, $50, or $100. They were thinking it would help their community, help their district, and help their causes. He spun back to Waters, fast and aggressive. Instead, it helped Karen Waters buy a house, buy a car, and live a comfortable life on their money. It was on donations from people who struggle, who work multiple jobs, who clip coupons, and who worry about bills. His voice built and crescendoed, stating, "While your daughter got rich, that is what their donations bought. Not representation, not advocacy, and not change, but just your daughter's bank account." The audience erupted, booing and shouting, "Give it back! Refund! Fraud!" Waters's hands went to her face, covering and hiding. That was a defensive gesture, that guilty gesture, and Bongino saw it and knew what it meant. "In the Secret Service, we investigated financial crimes, money laundering, embezzlement, and fraud. I have seen it all, and you know what this is." He pointed at her, direct and accusatory. "This is it. This is fraud. Taking money under false pretenses, using it for personal gain, and family enrichment is textbook fraud." Waters tried to speak. Mouth opened, closed, and opened again. No words came, just that defensive posture and those hands covering her face. It was that realization that there is no way out. Jake Tapper tried to give her an opening, asking, "Congresswoman, would you like to respond?" "She cannot respond," Bongino said, not letting her off. "There is no response because the numbers are public record in FEC filings. Anyone can look them up. Over $1 million to her daughter. It is documented, and he produced more papers and held them up. Year by year, payment by payment. Karen Waters. Karen Waters. Karen Waters. It was always the daughter, always family, and always enrichment. He turned to the camera, to America, and to 10 million people watching. This is what swamp creatures do. This is what Beverly Hills Marxists do. They preach about helping people, about fighting for communities, and about representing the poor. And then they use your money to make their families rich. Back to Waters. She was shrinking now and getting smaller. The aggressive matriarch who dominated Congress for decades was gone, just a politician exposed, caught, and guilty. With all due respect, and Bongino's voice dripped venom, your daughter is a millionaire from campaign funds, from small donors, and from people who believed in you. While South Central struggles, while Compton has crime, and while Watts has poverty, your daughter is fine, she is wealthy, she is comfortable. He paused to let it sink in that it was on their money. The studio was on its feet now, half standing, half shouting, and all engaged. This was not entertainment anymore. This was exposure. It was real exposure, and truth being dragged into light it had avoided for years. Waters could not look up and could not face it. She just sat there, hands over face, shoulders hunched, defensive, guilty, and caught. That is two scandals, folks. Bank bailout and daughter payoffs. Both using your money and both enriching her family. If you are angry, if you donated to campaigns and want to know where your money went, share this and tag people. Let them see what corruption looks like up close. He picked up another folder, even thicker, because now we talk about where she lives. And trust me, you are going to love this. The Beverly Hills Marxist in her $6 million mansion while representing South Central is my favorite. Waters looked up, fear in her eyes, real fear. Because she knew what was coming, and she knew there was no defense. Bongino's tone changed to more mockery now, that edge of disbelief mixed with disgust. Let me explain something to you about Maxine Waters's district. He pulled out a map of District 43, California, and put it on the screen. South Central Los Angeles, Watts, and Compton. These are some of the poorest communities in California with high poverty, high crime, and struggling families. That is her district. That is who she represents, and that is who voted for her for 30 years. He let that sink in. You know where Maxine lives? Pause building. Beverly Hills. Another pause, heavier this time. Not near Beverly Hills, not Beverly Hills adjacent, and not in a neighborhood that is like Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills, a $6 million mansion. $6 million. He walked toward Waters to ask, "Let me ask you something, Congresswoman. When is the last time you spent a night in South Central, in your district, in the community you represent?" Waters tried to answer, saying, "I do not see how that is relevant." "When?" he asked, not aggressive but just insistent, with a simple question. "When is the last time you slept in your district among the people you represent?" Silence followed as she could not answer, and did not answer. "I will answer for you. Never, or close enough to never, that it does not matter. Because you do not live there. You live in Beverly Hills, in a mansion, in luxury. You are far away from the poverty you preach about, far away from the crime you ignore, and far away from the people you claim to represent." He turned to the audience and to the cameras. "Let me break this down. When I was NYPD, I lived in Brooklyn near the people I served. That is what cops do. And that is what public servants do. They live with the people, not away from them. Back to Waters. But you represent South Central from Beverly Hills. You advocate for the poor from a mansion. You lecture about inequality while living in the top 1%. Waters tried deflection, saying many representatives live outside their districts. Many representatives are not you. His voice rose with that intensity building. Many representatives do not spend 30 years preaching about poverty while accumulating millions. Many representatives do not lecture about oppression from $6 million mansions. He walked among the audience again, asking, "How many of you live in the area you work in, or grew up in, or serve?" Most hands went up. Normal people do that. Normal people live near their work, near their community, and near the people they serve. But Maxine is not normal. She is special. She is elite. She is Beverly Hills. The sarcasm was thick enough to choke on. "Let me explain something," and he walked back to center stage. Her constituents in South Central have an average income of $30,000 a year. Her constituents in Compton are struggling with crime, with poverty, and with failing schools. Her constituents in Watts face some of the hardest circumstances in America. He pointed at Waters, saying, "And their congresswoman lives in a $6 million mansion in Beverly Hills. The average home price there is $4 million. She is surrounded by wealth, by luxury, and by everything her constituents do not have." Waters tried anger, raised her voice in a way that worked before, shouting, "I have dedicated my life to service." "To what?" Bongino exploded, not controlled anymore, but raw. "To getting rich, to accumulating wealth, and to living in luxury, while your district suffers? That is what you dedicated your life to." He faced the cameras. "The people of California are watching. South Central is watching. Compton is watching. And Watts is watching. They want to know why their congresswoman lives in Beverly Hills. Why does she not live near them? And why does she not live with them?" Back to Waters, quieter now and more dangerous. "Because you are not one of them, and you never were. You used them. You used their votes. You used their trust. And you used their poverty as a platform to get rich. And now you live in Beverly Hills while they are still in South Central, still struggling, still poor, and still waiting for the help that never comes." He produced property records and put them on the screen. Her mansion images showed luxury and wealth. Then images of South Central showed poverty, struggle, and crime side by side. The contrast was devastating. $6 million for her, $30,000 a year for them. That is representation. That is advocacy. And that is fighting for the people. The audience was getting louder and angrier. This was not abstract anymore. This was visual. This was proof, undeniable, obvious, and damning. With all due respect, Maxine, the phrase had become his weapon, his recurring jab. "You are worth millions, millions, while your district struggles and while your constituents live in poverty. While families in South Central worry about making rent, you are in Beverly Hills, safe, secure, and wealthy." Waters could not look at him, could not face the cameras, and could not maintain any composure. She just sat there shrinking, getting smaller, the matriarch becoming the accused. That is called hypocrisy. Where I come from, that is called fraud. That is called using people. Taking their votes, taking their trust, taking their support, and giving them nothing in return except more of the same poverty they have always had. He walked toward her one more time. "You know what kills me?" What really kills me. It is not that you are rich, good for you, as America rewards success. It is that you are rich while preaching against wealth. You are living in luxury while attacking luxury. You are part of the elite while claiming to fight the elite. His voice dropped to that cop intensity. You are a fraud, a Beverly Hills Marxist living the life you claim to oppose. You are benefiting from the system you claim to fight and getting rich off the people you claim to help. The studio erupted in a standing ovation, not for Bongino, but for truth, for exposure, and for finally seeing what everyone suspected, but nobody proved. Waters put her head down, could not watch, and could not listen. She was just there, present, but broken. The aggressive politician who started this confrontation was gone, destroyed, and exposed. That is 3 scandals: bank bailout, daughter payoffs, and Beverly Hills mansion. All while representing South Central, all while claiming to fight for the poor, and all while getting rich off their trust. He opened another folder, this one darker and more serious. But now we talk about violence, about incitement, and about her calling for people to harass government officials, about real people getting threatened, getting attacked, and getting hurt because of her words. His voice changed and got harder, taking on that Secret Service edge. This one is personal because I spent my career protecting people, and she spent her career putting people in danger. Waters looked up, eyes wide and terrified, because this one was on video. Her words, her face, and her voice were undeniable. Bongino's entire demeanor shifted. This was not sarcasm anymore. This was not mockery. This was cop, real cop, angry cop, and protective cop. Let me explain something to you. His voice quieter, colder, and more dangerous than any shouting. In the Secret Service, our job was simple: protect the president, protect government officials, and protect them from threats, from harassment, and from violence. That was our mission, and that was our purpose. He walked slowly toward Waters. And you called for the exact opposite. You called for harassment, for confrontation, and for violence. He stopped and pulled out a tablet with video queued up. June 2018 in Los Angeles, you are at a rally, and you say this. He played it. Her voice, her face, and her words on screen appearing undeniable. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them. He paused the video and let those words hang there. Create a crowd, push back on them. He repeated it slowly. Those are your words, Maxine, not taken out of context and not edited. Your words on video telling people to harass government officials. He walked among the audience to let me break this down for everyone. Create a crowd means mob action. Push back means physical confrontation. She is not talking about peaceful protest. She is talking about harassment, about intimidation, and about making people afraid. Back to Waters, you continued saying, tell them they are not welcome anymore. Anywhere, anywhere. Not in public spaces, not in restaurants, not in stores, anywhere. His voice rose, building. And you know what happened? People listened. They created crowds. They pushed back. They harassed officials. They threatened families. And they scared children. He pulled out news reports and put them on the screen. Secretary of Homeland Security eating dinner with her family sees a mob show up. They start chanting and start threatening. She has to leave. Her family terrified because of your words. More reports showed the White House press secretary at a restaurant kicked out. the owner citing your speech and your call to action as your incitement. Moore showed a senator at an airport, confronted, harassed, and surrounded because you told people to create crowds. His voice kept building, getting louder and more intense. Cabinet members, senators, and officials were all harassed and all threatened, all because you told people to do it. Waters tried to defend Supusi, saying I was talking about peaceful. Bongino exploded, saying you said push back. You said not welcome anywhere. Those are not peaceful words. Those are threatening words. He got closer, right in front of her. Let me explain something. In my time protecting presidents, we dealt with threats every single day. Real threats from people who believed violence was justified. And you know what gives them permission? What gives them justification? He pointed at her. People like you with power, with platforms, telling them it is okay, telling them to create crowds, telling them to push back. You give them permission. Waters tried again, voice barely working, saying, I was exercising my First Amendment rights. The First Amendment does not protect incitement. His voice filled the studio. I am a cop. I know the law, and you crossed the line. He turned to the audience, asking how many of you have ever been threatened for your political beliefs, harassed, or confronted. Several hands went up, scattered, representing real people and real experiences. It is scary, right? It is intimidating, and it makes you afraid. Afraid to speak, afraid to participate, and afraid to engage. He let them nod, let them remember. And people like Maxine Waters, they create that fear, and they cause that harassment with their words and with their incitement. He walked back to center. In the Secret Service, we had a saying, words have consequences. What you say matters, how you say it matters, and who hears it matters. He faced Waters directly. You told people to harass officials, and they did. You told them to create crowds, and they did. You told them to push back, and they did. Those are consequences, direct consequences, cause and effect. His voice dropped to that quiet intensity. And when people got hurt, when families got scared, and when children cried because mobs were threatening their parents, you did not apologize. You did not take it back. You doubled down. He played more video of her defending the comments, refusing to apologize and insisting she meant it. See that? That is not a mistake. That is not an error. That is intentional. That is calculated. That is knowing you incited harassment and being proud of it. The audience was silent now, a different silence, a heavy silence. This was not about money anymore. This was about safety, about security, and about people being hurt because someone with power told others to hurt them. Bongino's voice stayed quiet, having more impact that way. With all due respect, and I mean absolutely none, you put people in danger. Real people, government officials doing their jobs, their families and their children. You put them all in danger because you were angry about politics. Waters was crying now, openly crying. Not remorse tears, but caught tears, guilty tears, the tears of someone who knows they crossed a line and got caught. Let me explain what that makes you. And he moved closer. In my time as a cop, we arrested people who incited violence, who called for harassment, and who put others in danger. We did not give them a pass because they were angry. We did not excuse it because they had political disagreements. We arrested them. He pointed at her, saying, you should have been arrested. What you did is a crime called incitement. It is on the books and it is prosecutable, But you are in Congress, so you got away with it." His voice rose again. "But the people do not forget. The people remember. Restaurant workers remember being put in danger. Officials remember being harassed. And families remember being threatened. All because you told people to do it." The audience erupted, not cheering or booing, but just anger, raw anger. The sound of people realizing that someone with power had abused it, had put regular people in danger, and had incited violence and faced no consequences. Waters could not look up, could not face it. Hands over face, crying, broken, the aggressive matriarch was completely gone. Just a scared politician knowing she is exposed. That is 4 scandals, folks. Bank bailout, daughter payoffs, Beverly Hills mansion, and inciting violence. All documented, all proven, and all on the record. If you have ever been threatened for your politics, or if you know anyone who has been harassed, share this. Let people see what happens when powerful people call for violence. He picked up the final folder, the thickest one. But we are not done, because now we talk about 30 years, 3 decades of Maxine Waters, 3 decades of corruption, and 3 decades of getting rich while her district got poorer. This is the summary, this is the total picture, and this is the knockout. Waters looked up, eyes red, face wet, and terrified, because she knew. 30 years of everything was all coming out all at once with no escape. Bongino looked tired. Not actually tired, but performatively tired. That exhaustion of seeing too much corruption, too much fraud, and too much getting away with it. 30 years, he said it quietly, letting it hang there. Maxine Waters has been in Congress for 30 years, since 1991, when George H.W. Bush was president. The Soviet Union still existed, and the Internet was brand new 30 years ago. He walked slowly and deliberately. You know what South Central looked like 30 years ago? Poor, high crime, struggling schools, failing infrastructure, and problems everywhere. Pause. You know what South Central looks like now, 30 years later, after 3 decades of Maxine Waters representing them. Final pause. Devastating pause. Exactly the same, actually worse, with poverty higher, crime higher, schools still failing, and infrastructure still crumbling. Every metric is worse or the same, but never better. He faced Waters. But you know what did get better. Your bank account, your house, and your daughter's bank account. Those got better. South Central is still waiting. She could not respond, just sat there crying, broken, and finished. Let me break this down. He pulled out statistics and put them on the screen. 30 years ago, South Central had these poverty rates, these crime rates, and these unemployment rates. Numbers appeared. Today, same rates, higher rates, worse rates. More numbers. 30 years ago, Maxine Waters was worth maybe $1 million. Comfortable. Today, she is worth multiple millions, with a mansion, daughter enriched, and family wealthy. The contrast is stark, damning, and obvious. In my time protecting presidents, I saw a lot of politicians, good ones, bad ones, corrupt ones. But this, he gestured at the screens and at the data. This is special. This is someone who got elected to help people and instead helped herself for 3 decades. He walked toward Waters. You have had 30 years to make a difference, 30 years to help, and 30 years to serve. And what do your constituents have to show for it? He waited, letting her try to answer. She could not. Nothing. They have nothing. Same poverty, same crime, same struggling, same waiting for help that never comes. 30 years, zero progress for them, his voice rose. But for you, 30 years of success, of wealth accumulation, of family enrichment, and of living better while they live the same or worse. He turned to the cameras, saying the people of California are watching. South Central is watching, and they want answers. After 30 years of Maxine Waters, what has changed? What has improved? And what has gotten better? Back to Waters. Nothing. The answer is nothing. Your district has waited 30 years. 30 years and gotten nothing while you have gotten everything. He pulled out more documents, more evidence, bank scandal, daughter payments, Beverly Hills mansion, ethics investigations, financial irregularities, and incitement. All of it over 30 years. It is not one mistake. It is not one bad decision. It is a pattern. His voice got harder, adopting that prosecutor tone. 30 years of using public office for private gain. That is the pattern. That is the career. That is the legacy. He walked to center stage and stood under the lights. With all due respect, Maxine, and we have established I mean none, you have had an entire career to help people, to serve, and to make a difference. Instead, you made yourself rich, made your family comfortable, and made your daughter a millionaire. He pointed at her. While South Central struggled, while Compton suffered, and while Watts waited, they got nothing, and you got everything. That is not public service. That is theft. That is corruption. And that is using people for personal gain. The studio was on its feet, all of them, 300 people standing. Some were applauding, some silent, but all were witnessing the destruction of someone who had held power for 3 decades and abused it every single day. Waters had her head down, completely down, shoulders shaking and crying, not trying to defend anymore, not trying to spin, just broken, destroyed, and exposed. After 30 years of getting away with it, that is it, folks. 5 scandals, 5 rounds, bank bailout using your money, daughter payments from your donations, Beverly Hills mansion while representing poverty, and inciting violence that hurt real people. 30 years of corruption getting rich while her district suffered. He faced the main camera. Direct address to America. This is what the swamp looks like. This is what corruption looks like. This is what happens when someone gets power and never faces consequences for 30 years until now, until tonight. Pause, let it breathe. Share this everywhere. Subscribe, comment, and tell everyone you know, because corruption does not expose itself. Someone has to do it. Someone has to ask the questions. Someone has to demand answers. And tonight, someone did. The audience erupted in a standing ovation, thunder applause. Not for Bongino, but for truth, for exposure, and for accountability finally arriving after 3 decades. Waters could not move, could not speak, and could not function. She just sat there, destroyed. The aggressive matriarch who dominated Congress for 30 years gone. Just a broken politician, facing consequences she had avoided for an entire career. Jake Tapper tried to wrap up, saying we should thank our guests, but nobody was listening. The show was over, the exposure complete, and the damage done. Waters broken, Bongino victorious, America watching, and nobody would forget what they had just seen. The Beverly Hills Marxist was finally exposed after 30 years on live television in front of 10 million people with no escape, no spin, and no way out. Justice, real justice, the kind that happens when someone finally asks the right questions, when evidence finally gets shown, and when truth finally matters more than power. The video went viral before the credits finished rolling. 20 million views in the first hour, 50 million by morning, and 100 million by the end of the week. Maxine Exposed was trending worldwide, and Beverly Hills Marxist was becoming a permanent nickname. Bongino Destroys Waters was capturing every clip, every exchange, and every moment of destruction. Conservative media exploded. Fox News ran the confrontation on loop, and Hannity devoted his entire show to analysis. Tucker Carlson called it the most devastating political takedown in television history. Laura Ingraham played the bank section 5 times. The ratings were massive, record-breaking, and historic. Liberal media tried to defend her, but could not. The evidence was too clear, and the corruption too obvious. CNN ran segments about controversial moments, but their own studio had hosted the destruction. MSNBC tried focusing on Bongino's tone instead of Waters' crimes, but it did not work. By evening, even they had moved on, left her to drown alone. Waters' office stopped answering phones immediately, voicemail full within an hour, and the system crashed by midnight. Overwhelmed by constituents demanding answers, demanding resignation, and demanding she finally face consequences. Her staff quit in a mass exodus because nobody wanted the association. Chief of staff gone by morning, press secretary by afternoon, and legislative director by evening. Within 48 hours, 3 people were left running her entire operation. Everyone else fled, resumed circulating, looking for any work that was not connected to Maxine Waters. The squad was silent. Not one tweet of support, not one statement of solidarity, and not one public appearance together. Omar posted something about unity without naming Waters. Tlaib went dark. AOC retweeted environmental news, and Presley deleted social media apps. The Progressive Alliance was fake, always had been, and now everyone knew. Nancy Pelosi's office released one sentence: "The Congresswoman must address these serious allegations." Translation: "You are on your own, figure it out. Good luck, you will need it." Democratic leadership privately discussed options like committee removals, censure, and expulsion. Waters had been protected for decades, but protection has limits, and she had exceeded them. Within days, 3 different ethics complaints were filed, all citing the same evidence Bongino presented: bank bailout, daughter payments, and financial irregularities. The complaints were formal, official, and public. The House Ethics Committee announced an investigation, a formal investigation. No choice after that exposure, after that evidence, and after 10 million people watched corruption explained in detail on live television. A primary challenger announced within hours, didn't wait, struck while Waters was wounded. Not another progressive, but a moderate, a reformer, someone from South Central, actually from the district, actually living there, and actually representing the people. His slogan was, "South Central deserves better." His first ad clips from the debate: Waters' mansion versus South Central poverty. Her daughter's payments versus constituent struggles. Her 30-year record versus 30 years of no progress. The contrast was devastating. Fundraising exploded. 2 million in the first week, all small donors. $5, $10, $20 from people who had waited 30 years for someone to challenge her. For someone to finally say what everyone knew, what everyone saw, and what everyone suffered under. Polling showed him leading by 15 points within 2 weeks, by 20 points by the end of the month. The lead growing as more people watched the debate, as more people learned the truth, and as more people realized they had been used for 30 years. Campaign donors demanded refunds, thousands of them. People who had given to Waters over the years, whose money went to her daughter who wanted it back, wanted justice, and wanted accountability. Her campaign tried damage control. They issued statements, called it partisan attacks, called it racism, and called it sexism, but none of it worked. The evidence was public record, the proof was undeniable, and the corruption was obvious. Waters deleted social media apps as she could not handle the comments, the mockery, and the truth. Millions of posts, all brutal, all accurate, and all permanent. She had not appeared publicly since the debate. 3 weeks of silence. No statements, no interviews, no town halls. Just hiding in Beverly Hills in her mansion away from the district, away from the people, and away from accountability. Her approval rating collapsed from 68% to 29% in weeks. The fastest political implosion in California history. Polling showed her losing the primary by 35 points to literally anyone, to any challenger, to any option other than Maxine Waters. South Central community leaders called for resignation in a formal statement that was public and brutal. She used our poverty to get rich, she used our votes to get power, and she used our trust to enrich her family for 30 years. We demand she resign. We demand someone who actually represents us, who actually lives with us, and who actually cares about us. The statement echoed, shared, retweeted, and posted everywhere by everyone. The community she had represented for 30 years turned against her, finally, completely, and permanently. Beverly Hills neighbors stayed quiet, as rich people do not comment on scandals involving other rich people, a professional courtesy. But they knew, everyone knew, the mansion on the hill belonged to a criminal, to someone who had stolen from the poor to live among the rich, to the Beverly Hills Marxist. Bongino became a conservative hero. His radio show ratings doubled, tripled, highest ever. Advertisers paying premium rates, networks offering shows, book deals, appearing speaking invitations flooding in, but he kept his message simple and consistent. I am just a former cop who asked questions, questions everyone should have asked 30 years ago, questions journalists should have asked, questions ethics committees should have asked. I just asked, she could not answer. That is it. The phrase caught on. Just ask the questions became a conservative rallying cry applied to every politician, every scandal, and every cover-up. Simple questions, direct questions, questions that demand answers. Trump called Bongino personally, saying, "Beautiful job, beautiful. That is how you do it. You destroyed her completely." Plans discussed potential roles and future opportunities. The door opening wider. Waters looked for an exit strategy, post-Congress career options limited because nobody wanted her. Think tanks said no, universities said no, companies said no, and even progressive organizations passed. The brand was too damaged, the corruption too obvious, and the exposure too complete. Book publishers would not return calls, speaking agents stopped answering, and the Netflix deal never materialized. She was alone, completely alone. Everything she had built over 30 years destroyed in 2 hours by a former cop asking simple questions. Her Wikipedia page updated within hours. No longer senior member of Congress, no longer influential progressive, no longer civil rights icon. Just former U.S. representative subject of ethics investigations, lost primary following televised debate, known for controversial record and corruption allegations. That was her legacy. Former, controversial, investigations? Nothing else would be remembered. The 30 years forgotten, the corruption remembered, and the exposure permanent. Political obituaries were written while she still held office. The fall of Maxine Waters became a common headline, articles analyzing what went wrong, where she failed, and how she lost. But they all missed the point. She did not lose. She was exposed for what she had always been: corrupt, self-serving, using people for personal gain for 30 years. Until someone finally asked questions. Until someone finally demanded answers. Until someone finally exposed the truth. Bongino was that someone. The Brooklyn cop who became a Secret Service agent, who became a radio host, who became the person who destroyed the Beverly Hills Marxist. Small donors who had been refunded told their stories. Dozens of them, hundreds. People who had given to Waters over the years, who had believed in her, who trusted her, who learned their money went to her daughter, who got checks back, who got justice finally. One elderly woman, never named publicly, just a donor from Compton, spoke about giving $20 a month for 5 years, $1,200 total. Thinking it helped her community, learning it helped Karen Waters buy a car. Getting a refund check, crying not from joy, but from betrayal. From 30 years of being used. Her story represented thousands, everyone who had trusted Waters, everyone who had believed, everyone who learned the truth, and everyone who got betrayed. South Central community organized without her. Other representatives helped. Real aid arrived. Real programs started, and real progress began. The community remembered who actually helped versus who just took, remembered who showed up versus who showed off, remembered 30 years of nothing versus 3 weeks of something. Beverly Hills said nothing, as rich neighborhoods do not comment on scandals. But property values near her mansion dropped slightly because reputation matters even in wealth. Nobody wants to live next to exposed corruption. Nobody wants their neighborhood associated with the Beverly Hills Marxist. Conservative movement used Waters as a symbol of everything wrong. Of 30 years of corruption. Of politicians getting rich while constituents suffer. Of using poverty as a platform for personal wealth. She became the example, the warning, the proof of everything they had always said. Bongino used victory as a launching point for bigger shows, bigger platforms, and a bigger audience. The guy who destroyed Maxine Waters, the cop who caught the criminal, the investigator who exposed corruption. That was his brand now. That was his power. But he stayed consistent. I just asked questions, simple questions, direct questions. Questions based on evidence, based on public records, and based on facts. She could not answer them. That is not my fault, that is hers. And he was right. The questions were simple, the evidence was public, and the corruption was obvious. For 30 years, until someone asked, until someone demanded answers, until someone exposed it all. Waters learned what happens when accountability finally arrives, when protection finally fails, and when power finally ends. She learned that 30 years of getting away with it does not mean you get away with it forever. Eventually, someone asks questions. Eventually, evidence gets shown. Eventually, truth matters. The Beverly Hills Marxist learned it the hard way. On live television, in front of 10 million people, with no escape, no spin, and no way out. Just a cop asking questions. Just evidence speaking truth. Justice finally arriving after 3 decades. That is what happened when Brooklyn met Beverly Hills, when a cop met a criminal, and when someone finally asked the questions everyone should have asked 30 years ago. Waters got exposed, destroyed, and finished. And everyone watched, everyone knew, and everyone remembered. Justice does not always arrive, but when it does, when someone finally asks the right questions, when evidence finally matters more than power, it is devastating, complete, and permanent. The Beverly Hills Marxist learned that the hard way, the only way that matters, with the whole world watching and nobody forgot. Folks, if watching Dan Bongino destroy Maxine Waters with simple questions gave you even a fraction of the satisfaction it gave those small donors who got refunds, hit that like button right now. Share this, send it to everyone, because this is what accountability looks like when someone finally demands it. Let people see what happens when a former cop asks the questions journalists should have asked 30 years ago. When evidence matters more than power, when corruption finally faces consequences. Comment below. Should Waters face prosecution? Should other politicians be investigated the same way? Who should be exposed next? Because America is watching, South Central is watching, and we are not forgetting. Subscribe because there are plenty more where she came from. Bernie, AOC, the Squad, all hiding similar contradictions, all living similar lies, all waiting for someone to ask simple questions they cannot answer. This is just the beginning. Dan Bongino showed how it is done. Ask questions, demand answers, show evidence, let corruption expose itself. That is what we deliver every time. No exceptions, no excuses, just questions, just evidence, just truth. See you in the next one, and trust me, it is going to be even better. Because justice does not sleep, truth does not stop, and neither do we.